Canada used to be one of those countries when the end of the world is coming, you better be in Canada. And I think that is gone, at least for in the last few years, because especially after pandemic and in a time of pandemic, we know how bad the government manage the situation. Now, as you can see, this line, population of Canada still going up, but the growing rate, they're going down. Now, right now they are around 40 million Canadian, which is kind of strange because, like I said, a long time, not so long time ago, everybody knows that Canada, it's pretty much a better way of life than USA, and they have almost 10 times less population than USA, so people are still choosing to live in USA than Canada. Now, in 1955, Canadian population was around 15 million people, which is extremely low, especially for such a big country. But in 2025, they grow to 40 million people. Now, when I look at the fertility rate, it was 3.75, which is very healthy for a country, especially in the 1955. But now it's 1.33, so much less than that, almost 3 times less than used to be just not even 80 years ago. Now, with population density, they double it from 2 to 4, and also in Canada, a lot of people used to live outside the cities in a country area. In 1955 was 65%, now it's 80%. And in the future, it's gonna go a bit up to 86%, so not that much increase it for the next 25 years. But now, let's see the future. From, let's say, 40 million people in 2050, 25 years from now, it's gonna be 45 million people. So not that much of the growth, and the yearly changing is gonna go down and down with pretty much every year. Now, migration in Canada is, I would say, pretty strong, because you can see from the entire history, especially from the 1955, they keep growing, and or is that stable? So the Canadian native population, they are still growing, not that much as migration. So they have already more migration than the actually people inside the country that are born and raised there. But in the future, we're gonna see, especially around 2040, the migration is gonna surpass the native population. So you're gonna have even more migrants than the actually population. So that means the native population is going down, but the migration is still on the, let's say, on the same level as before. So it was a stable migration, but with a lower Canadian native population. Canada is not a poor country, or I don't know, something like a third world or second world. It's a first world country, and with all that they have, even now today, the population is still going a bit down, which is kind of normal. But in the future, when it's going to be much better, they also going to go down. But they used to grow when a time like today and a few years ago, when they're still doing very well, especially much better than they're doing today, and the population growing. So it's not exactly an exact link, which how well you're doing in economics, then that's supposed to have more kids, or vice versa. But it's just pretty much, I think, a generation thing. Now, life expectancy in Canada, it's obviously pretty high, and they're still growing. For both sexes, it's 82 years, for females 85 almost, and for the male 80 years old. So pretty good for the Canada. As the cities, everybody knows that Canadian will have that big border with the US. It's pretty much the only land border that they have, and most of the people, I think, they live in 100 miles of the border, something like that. So it just shows how empty the Canada actually is. But the condition in the north of Canada, it's much harsher than obviously the south. So you're not gonna want to live, especially at minus, I don't know, 50 degrees in the circle Arctic, especially in the winter. Now, Toronto is the biggest city with 2.6 million, which is very healthy in my opinion, especially for the Canada as a huge country. Montreal 1.7, and Calgary with 1 million. So I think they have like 4 cities which are over a million. But again, I would not trust again those numbers from the Canadian government because we don't know how socialist they become. And I think they might trying to hide the real number of migration and also the real number of the growth from the inside the country, or let's say decline of inside the country. So I don't think they're gonna reach even 45 million people, especially in 2050. I think they go much lower than that, maybe 42 if they get lucky, and especially probably if migration is gonna be a hot topic in the future, probably they're gonna cut down on that, and the Canadian population they're still going down because let's face it, we already way too many people, especially in Canada, because you have that border with the US and everybody knows, especially now, how bad the government in Canada was, and who knows, maybe they change it now, but they can come back to that policy once again. So it's much easier to flee in America and just leave the Canada for good, because I think even the wages are much better in USA, and USA comes with a lot of good stuff than you have in Canada. One of them, which is in my opinion the biggest of them all, is the climate. You can go, especially if you live in Canada with those harsh winters and you don't want to go there, you don't want to live there anymore, you can go back. You can go down in Texas or Florida or Arizona, and you're gonna have a completely different life there. Much more sunnier, much more hotter. But that's the beauty of America. Doesn't matter who you are, you can always find a place there. Now, like I say, for the future, I don't think they're gonna get that much higher with the population. Obviously, even by those statistics, 5 million increase is pretty much nothing, especially for such a big country. So I don't think they're gonna go even there. Probably they're gonna stop around 40 million, especially for this century. Probably gonna go even lower than that. We're gonna go like 35 or 30 million by the end of the century, and who knows what's gonna happen in the next one. But for this one, I think the Canadian they have a very, very slow growth, if that is going to actually happen, but the decline is there, and it's going to happen, I think, much faster and harder than anyone predicted, because so many things in there, like I say, even the government, it's not something to be trusted with. And I think we know that what happened in pandemic with that protest and everything that followed that, but I don't think that people talk enough about that, because it seems like the pandemic was like 50 years ago, not just 5 years ago, and people forgot it. And who knows, if something bad happen in the future again, they're gonna go back to the same solution that they thought when the first pandemic hit. So I think they should talk about what happened there and pretty much take responsibility, especially for those people who was in a charge in the government. So something like that, they will never happen again. And I'm talking about that I think that truck drivers, when they got their credit card cancelled, the bank account freeze, all that horrible stuff that seems like nobody talk about it, nobody cares anymore. Now, that was a video about Canada. If you live in Canada and you are one of those 40 million people right now, tell me how actually the life it is there, and in which part of the country do you live, and would you live to Canada for the US, or stay there for the rest of your life?